Representative Gannon, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm ready to go back to work, and it's Friday. How's that?
It is Friday afternoon, man.
Yeah.
These have been the longest. I think this is week five. Is this week five of the legislature or week four?
Six, I think.
Now, didn't we miss the first week of January?
Yeah, five or six.
Fifth week. These have been the longest 5 weeks of my life. And I've had 3 kids. These were long. These are like long knockdown, drag out weeks.
Well, hey, they've been flying by for me. I've been involved in so many different issues and stuff that it seems just like yesterday we had the governor's speech.
That's funny because I do so many interviews in a day. Like if you ask me who I interviewed 2 days ago, I have no idea. It seems like a lifetime ago. I'm like, wait, did I have that guy? I did talk to somebody. I did talk to that guy. Was that? It's like, anyway, it is what it is. So you're on Rev and Tax, which is an interesting position because we have a lot of problems with attracting larger businesses to the state. We have problems with energy in the state. So for instance, the Meta data center that came in, it uses a dump truck of water, and we live in high desert. It uses an incredible amount of electricity, and we are trying desperately to get more electricity into the state and deal with that. It doesn't produce a lot of jobs, which is, it's not like, you got 10,000, white collar, high end, 6-figure jobs. It's like 50 people. Yes. One of them's a janitor. Okay, no problem. Yeah. So you don't have a lot of jobs, and the state, these companies are very used to getting very favorable tax situations when they move in. And that in itself is not a fantastic or crazy idea. Like there are a lot of states that negotiate with, say manufacturers, and then say like, hey, build your manufacturing here. You're going to bring a dump truck of real jobs. Like these are, and a lot of them. And by the way, we'll give you a really good, property tax deal.
Okay. And I'll give you an exception to that is Amazon. Amazon over in Canyon County came here and has created plenty of jobs at their warehouse.
Sure.
They are paying 100% of their value in property taxes, and they're not in an urban renewal district. They're just outside the urban renewal district, and that was one of their selling points. They said, "We'll pay property taxes," and they've done that. Some other companies think, "Oh well, yeah, we'll come there if we get all a free ride or close to a free ride." And so those need to be very carefully scrutinized, and I don't think we're doing that very well at the moment.
There was that famous situation with Amazon in New York with AOC, and she trashed on Amazon because it was Amazon, not because of the terms were not good, not because of job. Well, it was my understanding, at least from the cursory.
There was a lot. I think the de Blasio, the mayor, was offering almost $1 billion in concessions. There was a bunch of stuff.
But those concessions were also in line with the benefit the city would have gotten. Like he didn't offer the concessions, $1 billion of concessions just for a data center. He offered $1 billion of concessions. It was my understanding it was something like 10,000 jobs. And I mean, these are like really high end Amazon, corporate jobs. So it's like, listen, I'll give you $1 billion if you're paying everybody $250,000 and you got 10,000 of them. Well, what do we need to do to get that guy here?
Yeah, well, that ain't happening.
Yeah. But, well, it didn't happen at all. She drove it out of her district.
They were going to have to bulldoze bulldoze a lot of the area there, that housing, right? Affordable housing, and that's always an issue. But certainly, I look at that Amazon example. And I look at, how much do you have to give or should you give? And you're definitely right, though. The first criteria has to be, what are we getting as far as jobs is concerned?
Right. How do we protect Idahoans and defend Idahoans? And if it's the kind of thing where, for instance, like there are magnet stores. And again, this is a very common thing. Like you have a shopping center and you get a magnet store, and they've got Albertsons or Winco or something, and they get very, very cheap rent, because they're going to bring people in, and then all the supporting stores around them, coffee shops, ice cream shops, restaurants, things of that nature, they fill in the other places. So it's very common to attract people with favorable terms if you're going to have the surrounding benefit, right?
If there's a benefit.
But you have to have a benefit. Yes. It's not like, I gave you 50 jobs and I'm sucking all your water and your electricity. So talk to me about solving this problem.
Well, I think one thing we need to look at immediately is the energy is keeping our energy in Idaho. because we do, at this point, we import 40% of our energy, according to the governor's report. And if we're going to have these data centers in primarily in CUNA at the moment, we're going to have more energy. And in fact, and then of course the Micron investment is going to require a lot of energy. And in fact, Idaho Power has their projection is that the energy demand is going to start climbing significantly in 2025. It's been pretty flat for the last 10, 15 years. Gone up a little bit here and there, but now the curve goes up considerably for the next 5 years. Well, there's only one thing that could be causing that, and that's one primary thing that could be causing that, and that is these data centers and the Micron development. Now, you talk about Micron. Okay, there's a lot of jobs there.
Sure.
And good jobs, and everybody. There's going to be a ripple effect in the economy. And that may be a good analogy to your Amazon.
Sure,
Amazon
for sure.
So, and I think also the national security aspect of Micron. We've got to make sure we're making some chips in the United States, because we don't know what's going to happen on Taiwan, which makes a ton of them, South Korea, and so I think the Micron investment is very, very important, and certainly a priority.
Gotcha. Yeah, and again, when you're talking about Micron, that's an established, really, really well done. Like, I have friends that work in Micron, and they are very well taken care of. And coming back to your national security, I've heard from a lot of people that, when the supply chain broke down, it wasn't just toilet paper. It's like, try buying a car, man. Try, computers, and like all of these things skyrocketed in price. It's like, okay, that stinks. Most people can probably delay the purchase of a new car. Like, okay, we can get through that. But that really shook up people's perspective of how independent we actually are as a country if our daily functions are so dependent on potentially adversarial governments.
Exactly.
Right? And that leads obviously to one of the big problems with mining in the state of Idaho, because they're like, listen, one of the primary ingredients, antimonium, is it? One of the primary ingredients in defense ammunitions is something produced primarily by China and Russia. So it's like, okay, how is it that, like, if we have a bullet and we know that this bullet is responsible for our national security, but like, adversarial governments own the capacity for us to make this bullet, like, that's a bad thing.
We've got, self-sufficiency, I think is so important.
Right.
And it just goes hand in hand with the whole energy deal.
Right.
And it goes hand in hand with Lava Ridge. That, to a certain extent, Lava Ridge is about where is Idaho energy going to go? Because the Lava Ridge was going to connect to the intertie, which is $1 billion transmission line from Southern California to Jerome. That's where they were going to connect, and the Lava Ridge energy was going to go to California. And that was, you might remember the figure, well, there's going to be enough wind produced that they can light up 500,000 homes in Southern California. And that's something that really needs to be examined, that whole policy of where the energy goes that we develop here in this state. It should stay here until we've got some kind of huge surplus, and be administered by the service providers that provide the energy. Because if you don't do that, and you allow a private developer from New York just to come into somebody's farm and set up solar or set up a wind, whatever, and then send it out of state, primarily down south, our future is impacted as far as economic development is concerned, and as far as agriculture is concerned. I mean, you probably heard about the efforts to put solar on farmland. And okay, fine. I mean, that may be something that has to happen, but if it's going to happen, we need to make sure that solar is going to stay here in Idaho, because we're losing the farmland. And second, we need to make sure that it's really benefiting Idahoans, and that's where you get into this whole data center thing. And as I mentioned to you earlier, the data centers are not paying sales tax on the heavy equipment, the servers and the heavy equipment that they're putting in, and so this $4 billion data center that's got a siting company or data center is they have a siting company that's going around Ada County and evaluating. And if $2 billion of that is for servers and equipment that's exempt from sales tax, that's $120 million state of Idaho's losing.
Now, why would they exempt the servers and equipment within it from sales tax in Idaho?
That was done in 2019. It was a very close vote. I was there. I voted no. Primarily because the number of jobs is limited, maybe 50 or 100.
Okay, so that you're like, listen, you can take the exemption to sales tax, but I need more than just like 50 to 100 jobs. Like I need a big chunk of jobs because I'm giving you essentially $120+ million break. You got to supply me with something long-term and beneficial.
And then it turns out that because of a $400 million cap on property value, if a facility costs more than $1 billion, then because of that, this $4 billion data center, if it locates, will pay on only 10% of its value, or $400 million. So now we're getting nothing.
Okay. So back up here. So bottom line is, first off, we have the sales tax hit. Okay. And then we have, and the sales tax hit that's not offset by repetitive, long-term, high-quality jobs. Okay. So that stinks. And then we have the other benefit that we could get, which is substantial property tax, right?
Property tax relief, because remember that if they were paying on their $4 billion investment, and assuming that's their income, if they're paying on that, then all of the property taxpayers in Ada County pay less. The people in CUNA residents would pay less, and in the Ada County's case, it would be about a 4% tax reduction for every property in Ada County would have that if there was a $4 billion investment added into the mix.
Okay. What is that actual number? $4 billion. Does that equate to like $40 million in property tax? Like roughly 1%?
A $4 billion dollar investment. There's around $110 billion in value.
Yeah.
And so a $4 billion value
would increase the overall value of the area, and then that money would be distributed then effectively.
It would be lower. It would lower and the actual property tax they would pay would depend on the levy rate. But if it was if it was 1%, that'd be 40 million. 40 million, and if it's probably going to be around 0.008, which would be
8%.
It'd be eight hundredths. 0.8%.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah. It gets confusing.
0.8. No. I'm with you.
Oh, yeah. But the bottom line is, it would be significant property tax relief, and so
and we would be in it for almost $500 million over the next 10 years of value. Yeah, right? Because you'd have 400, and depending on what happened with the property assessments, but you'd have between $400 and $500 million of property tax collected over the next decade from that property.
Yeah, whatever it'd be. 10 times. Yeah, and that lowers all. So then we get an advantage. A benefit. And right now we're not getting a benefit from. And then there's the electric. The electric
consumption.
Consequence, and then there's the water consequence. And it's always seemed kind of interesting to me that we are locating, well, even Micron and these data centers in the desert. There's something about that.
Let me ask you a question though. Okay. You're not painting a very rosy picture, and I'm tracking everything you're saying, and I believe every word you're saying. I'm just wondering, like, Why, like, whose idea was this? And there has to have been some benefit somewhere where people are like, yeah, look, of all our options in the world, this is our best option.
I think it was 2019, and that was before Micron had announced its big expansion. And I think that the idea was there are construction jobs and for these data centers, and I think there's a and I would just say it was definitely not unanimous. It was very. I was there for the debate, and it was very close vote in the House. It was, and then I don't know the Senate. I think it was less close, but basically economic development. Hey, we need some jobs. We gotta, we don't have big employers.
Sure.
Moving here. This is everybody needs a data center. This kind of deal,
Gotcha.
And I don't mean to pick on data centers, but like with the electricity and like with, I view the world. What is the benefit to Idaho when we do something? When we make a decision at the legislature, how does that benefit all of us? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't.
That's a tough one. Talk to me about power in general in Idaho, because power in general is going up in cost, right? Like, the writing's on the wall.
Well,
right?
Yeah, because Idaho Power's own forecast is that they're out generating power. They're building a transmission line from Boardman to through Owyhee County. I'm not sure where it ends up. To transmit electricity from the Boardman area, and they're going to be able to buy hydropower through that line, and they're very excited about that. But it is going to cost $1 billion, and so at some point, ratepayers are going to be asked to help pay for that, and so where the electricity goes is consequential for us.
Why do we ship so much clean energy out of the state?
Well, we're not doing that because Lava Ridge got.
Well, no, but like Bonneville Power Company, we ship the bulk of the power from, like, say, dams. Our four lower state.
Well, we
dams.
do we do sell, or I say the power companies are sell back and forth. For example, this winter has been very mild. And if there's a lot of water going through those dams, there's going to be a lot of electricity, but we're not going to be using it as much. So, or we haven't been using it as much because of the mild winter. Then they will sell it to another area that can use it, and maybe even make a little money on the deal. And that of course helps the customers.
Gotcha. So the bottom line is we have, specifically with our power generation, like dams, right? Like, we don't, those produce a lot of energy in May. We use, our peak energy uses is like late July and then August. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially just, we can't store that up because they're not reservoirs. They're literally just like flow of the day dams. So if they're producing a lot of electricity in May, we have, that electricity has to go somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then we would, Idaho Power, whoever has the rights, with Rocky Mountain Power, would sell it. Yeah.
I spoke with Representative Rubel just a couple days ago regarding the reduction in revenue projections for the state. Now, there's a lot going on with tax rebates. I mean, obviously, Speaker of the House Moyle was, very excited about, trying to get up to about $400 million back to taxpayers. A lot of it with income tax, so that accounts for a smaller portion of people than other things. They are throwing some property tax relief on. They are talking about giving back more with grocery tax and things of that nature. But coupled with that is like, first off, JFAC can't decide what revenue projection they are going to go off of.
Yeah, but the gap there isn't real large. It's 6.3 or 6.4 billion is what they're looking at.
I thought it was a $300 million gap. I must have been off.
Well, that could be this week's news, and I haven't seen it.
Gotcha. Okay. But when you're talking about they can't determine what the revenue is going to be. Uh-huh. People are talking about giving $400 million back, which is fine, great. But we also start getting a decrease in revenue projections from some departments. Like, how do we reconcile this?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. I was on the Revenue Outlook Committee, and we came up with 6.4 or 6.3.
Okay.
That was the argument. Now, if the revenue has changed, I'm not
Gotcha.
aware there.
So you're still pretty confident we have 6.4 or 6.3 ish.
Well, that's the last I heard.
Gotcha.
And it could have changed this week. We get involved in our own committees, and what's going on in JFAC is, goes on in JFAC, and what goes on in revenue tax and June rules, and
Sure.
all it goes on. But I think generally speaking, it is fair to say that we have a lot of money.
Gotcha.
We're not, I had the figures. I think it was 5.2 billion was the last, was FY 25's budget. 5.6 is what the governor wants, and then 6.3 or 6.4 is what we're supposed to be getting.
Gotcha.
For FY 26. So there's a lot of room there, but there are some expenses. There's fire.
Right.
Fire is going to cost $100 million, and and the public defender system is in dire need of help. So
Gosh, no kidding. Yeah.
So
They're doing like, I think 30 million for water. There are a lot of pieces like that.
yeah, we could talk about water, but there's a lot of water projects going on.
Man, a huge number. I just recently had Jeff Raybould, the president of the water board, on, and man, it's wild to hear about all the things they're doing to try to recharge aquifers, get more, direct injection sites, all kinds of things to try to store as much water as possible, and then coax more of it out of the clouds as well as they go by. Like it's a bonkers machine.
It's a challenge.
Yeah,
I think it's a real challenge, and I do think that we need to be very careful and not expand into any more desert entry land, because for a while, or over the years, there's always been an effort to add agricultural property to irrigate new acres.
Sure.
And that may be catching up
right
to us.
I forgot. I wanted to ask you something. When you said, "Hey, look, we gotta be careful with projects and really try to focus energy projects that benefit Idaho," we don't have power over the Department of the Interior, right? If the BLM shows up and they're like, "Hey, we want to do this," and they have to hold public hearings and they have to take public comment, but like we don't. When the BLM showed up for Lava Ridge and like, "Hey, we're gonna put this, the biggest windmill farm in the world. There's gonna be 700 plus foot windmills, and we're gonna pump all that power to Southern California. Do you guys want that?" And it was like, "No, that sounds terrible." They're like, "Okay, thanks for letting us know. So we're going to start this day." Like they don't care, and we don't have any authority over them. So when you say like we got to do this thing, it's like, how do we do that?
Well, I'll tell you how you do it. Is first of all, and of course, there are wind projects or other projects proposed for private land too, and for endowment land. And oftentimes those projects, including the Lava Ridge, have to go through areas that are not owned by the feds. And so, and by that I mean transmission lines, or even the turbines themselves. One of the interesting things about Lava Ridge is that there were five under the proposal, sectors of land, sections of land that are owned by the endowment, Idaho Endowment, not the BLM. And it so happens that they are all included in the project. I think there's about 10 turbines that are going on them. And so to that extent, there's some control from the Idaho Endowment.
And to be clear, the Idaho Endowment is Idaho-owned lands, and the endowment favors, I think it's like 90% of the revenue goes to, for instance, public education, right? So Idaho has this land that's state land that's not owned by the federal government, that's not owned privately, but it's state land, and we get the benefit of, leasing or mineral rights, all of those things on that endowment land.
Yes, it was given to us in 1890 by the federal government at the time of statehood. And the goal was to support state services, state functions.
Yeah.
And so that's where that goes. But I think there's also the issues of where the transmission lines go, because you got to, even though it's on federal land, it's got to be transmitted someplace, and that goes over private land. And so there may be some planning and zoning issues that need to be considered, and there may be eminent domain issues that need to be considered. Because there are landowners who don't want transmission lines through their land, and so then eminent domain comes into effect, and that is a very interesting process.
Interesting is saying the least. I actually have a friend who had to deal with an eminent domain project on a piece of real estate he owned, and I mean, in his particular case, he actually was able to get this like wildly favorable deal, because it was a large commercial property that was vacant, and it was like, I think it was 2010, 2011. So it was right in the heart of, the economic downturn. And when you're dealing with eminent domain, they have to give you essentially the highest and best use as if it is fully occupied, which nobody had fully occupied, giant commercial buildings at the time. So that worked out for him. But at the same time, he's like, look, man, they got to, like, yeah, they're shoving money into my mouth, like, fine, but they also have a hammer over my head. And that is a really dark position to be in as a U.S. citizen.
Eminent domain is a grant of authority from the state. It's not something that's an inherent right for public utilities in particular, since that's what we're talking about. And it is not even for the state. The state has to outline how it works and how that grant goes, and of authority goes. And so it's not something that it's an extraordinary remedy, I would describe it as, and it is based on what the state wants to give. Eminent domain was given to railroads 100 years ago, for example, and power lines and a lot of other utilities were water delivery in particular, but they can be restrained too, because it's not like you have a constitutional right to eminent domain. Let me put it that way.
So it has to just be used sparingly and in extraordinary circumstances,
and it can be conditioned.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Energy, Lava Ridge, data centers. What are we missing?
I think you're covering most of it. That's the big, I think it's a big issue that we haven't really addressed much in the legislature this year, other than a resolution or something. We don't like Lava Ridge.
Sure.
That's not solving the problem, because and so we have to be a little more problem oriented with the legislation that we come up with, to try to keep the energy thing going, but making sure it benefits us as a state.
I have a great appreciation for that. I had Dean Diamond in, who was a property owner right next to the Lava Ridge property, and he was just incensed. He's like, this doesn't help us. And what's interesting is you have a lot of, we need to solve problems, right? Like, we need to solve energy. And there's I can't remember if it was Congressman Fulcher or someone else who was like, listen, there's no energy that people like. He's like, every single form of energy people have a problem with.
And let's talk about California for a minute, because
California stinks, man. It's a train wreck over there.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful place. And they don't want wind turbines on their beaches. I don't blame them.
Right.
But, there's a lot of wind. Of course, recently we heard about all the wind with the fires.
Right. It's not.
There's a lot of wind. They don't want that. I, in fact, passed out 15 pages of projects in California that were nixed because of public opinion. We don't want it here. We don't want it here. Lake County, Shasta County, Morro Bay. In Morro Bay, they've got lawsuits, and that's for a wind project that's supposed to happen 20 miles out in the ocean, and the fishermen are suing, and it's a litigation mess.
Right.
And I don't know how practical that is to have a wind farm 20 miles in the ocean anyway, but maybe it is. I don't know.
Look, somebody was going to make money. Somebody was going to make electricity. But the bottom line is, like, listen, so you got to get electricity somewhere. We have to do something.
I think everybody has to contribute. And I don't think that some states are doing as much. Now, you take wind, okay? Texas has 10 times the amount of wind energy that California has. Iowa, Kansas, New Mexico. California is actually 11th in the production of wind power. Now, this is according to the Department of Energy. This isn't PR from somebody.
Sure.
And they have, and that 11th position is very low. It's down with the other, 30, 40 states. And so you're going to have to, if you want to have clean energy and you want to have zero carbon emissions, you're going to have to walk the walk. And that was one of the things that really got me going on sending the energy there, because Wyoming and Idaho are targets for clean energy. And that's great,
as long as it goes to us.
Well, as long as our needs are met.
Yeah, right.
And we're not putting our farmland out of business, and we're importing 40% of our energy. So, we've got some coal. We've got some coal energy that originates from coal plants too. So that's a big concern.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Representative Gannon, I appreciate you, sir.
Well, we ended up just talking about energy.
I guess so.
I guess you're
going to have to come back and talk about something else next time.
This is what I've been talking about for all month. So
yeah,
it's kind of fun to chat about it.
Great. Well, listen, come back. Let's keep the conversation going. Excuse me. I've talked about so many different aspects of what you kind of brought together completely, which is, I've talked about Lava Ridge, and you talk about the Speed Council, you talk about different,
the Speed
nuclear
Council,
and whatnot.
There's your Speed Council. Yeah. I mean, that bothers me a bit, that we're speeding up that we may bypass some quality of life issues on our public lands.
How is that? Because I've spoken with several people about this, and is it that, for instance, Rich Stover, who's the director of energy and mineral resources, he was very clear that he's like, listen, we are not passing up public comment. We are not, we're bringing everybody together. And essentially you have duplicate processes for these different departments. Like, listen, can we all get together and all work towards, making a more effective treadmill with getting these projects through the requisite inspection, through the requisite permitting process, things of that nature. But there was no indication. And he made it clear. He's like, we are not eliminating inspections.
Well, that's good. Yeah, that's good. And all I've seen is a press release and
gotcha.
And speed. And every time you say speed, you just wonder, what's going to happen here. But
but essentially their emphasis is, look, let's say you have 3 different entities that are concerned with some permitting project, and each of those 3 entities requires the same process to be done and like the same report to be made, but it just has to be their report. They want the exact same data. They'll even use the same guy, but they're just making it happen 3 times. It's like, can we get everybody together and say like, oh, you want file A too? Like, I love file A. Let's all get file A together one time. Things of that nature.
Sense.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like, look, I'm a dummy, but this is like, these are the things they come in and tell me. It's like, but there were a lot of people worried about fast tracking projects, rubber stamping projects, passing up public comment or things of that nature. And they're like, no, man, that's not what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It was a
good.
good time. Yeah. Yeah. It's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, look, come back. Let's talk some more issues. Obviously we're just kind of here in the middle of the month of February. A couple people are very much convinced we're going to the middle of April. So come back in March. Let's do this again.
We'll see what's See what's happened by March.
Yeah, right. I think we're going to have an answer on a number of things, man. We'll have an answer on, obviously school choice seems like it'll be hashed out. There are a lot of bills going through. It's pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
Wild. Anyway, thank you for coming, and we'll do it again.
All righty.
Absolutely.
Thank you.